One, what is a word salad? Kamala Harris town hall on CNN. 2, what is a bombshell? They're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at Donald Trump with 2 weeks until the race for president. What, at this point, would actually serve to end the campaign? What would you believe? What would land? What would explode? What is a bombshell? 3, on the road in Pennsylvania, David Marcus checks in with the swing voter here, now, on The Will Cain Show. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand if you're listening on terrestrial radio by heading over to Apple or Spotify and hitting subscribe. Then you will have in your feed, on your phone, The Will Cain Show as a podcast. That means you can listen to it when the show is not airing live on terrestrial radio, when you're walking on the treadmill, when you're walking in the neighborhood, when you're driving your car. Just subscribe on Apple or Spotify. Or as you're taking your lunch break every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, you head on over to Facebook or YouTube, and there you will join us. Subscribe on YouTube, and then you are a member of the Willisha. It feels not, in the cliched way of characterizing this, as though something has changed. It feels not as though something has ramped up. It almost feels like something has broken. Maybe even broken in the psyche. It feels like they have thrown the kitchen sink now at Donald Trump. It feels like they're rummaging around in the cabinets underneath the sink, looking for wrenches, pulling out pipes, and throwing Windex at Donald Trump. It feels panicked. And with panic comes ugliness. You've probably been there in your personal life when you're with someone in a, existential situation. They're backed into a corner. You've seen a wild animal. And at that point, there's no more pretense. There's nothing left. There's no more social niceties. And there kind of ceases to be politics. You begin to reveal your true self. You see the claws. You see the animal at its most base and what it can be and what it will do for survival in this case, and what it will do for power. Everything starting yesterday seems to have been broken in America. Let's break all that down, including Kamala Harris's town hall on CNN today here. And let's get it started now with story number 1. Joey Jones is my friend. He's also the author of Unbroken Bonds of Battle. He's a Fox News contributor, and he joins me now on The Will Cain Show. What's up, Joey? Let's just start with this. Before you tell me what's up, I already see the attire that you have chosen. Yeah, I see you rubbing your chest. I see you rubbing your G. I'll tell you what we're going to do. It's not subtle. I knew it wouldn't be subtle. I knew Joey was texting me on Saturday, and it was very friendly trash talk, which, by the way, Joey understands social niceties. As Georgia was beginning to dominate Texas, the text stopped. He knew the limits. He didn't continue to push. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to give you about 60 seconds. You have the floor. You can say whatever you want. We may revisit this topic a little bit later here on the Will Cain Show, but it's almost like clearing your throat. Go ahead. Clear your throat, Georgia.
Listen, you don't punch down. You take sympathy for those that are less fortunate. And also listen, Texas has such an easy schedule this year. The chances of us playing them again are pretty high. I mean, you don't have to be great to win the rest of your games if you're Texas. If they're not great, they may still end up in the SEC championship. Hopefully Georgia does too. And it'd be an opportunity to polish up the offense and make the score reflect how much better Georgia is than Texas, as opposed to that 30-15. That looks way too close for what was happening on the football field.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I'm not even going to take the bait. We're not going to do this right now. We're going to yo-yo. We're going to, in the style of Donald Trump, we're going to weave, and we will come back to Texas and Georgia. But I wanted to let you climb to the top of the mountain, and you chose to go to the top of the mountain and be patronizing.
Throw water bottles from the top of the mountain. That's what I did. I threw water bottles
like a kid in the student section in Austin. But what you chose to do was take the high road, which was not truly the high road. It was patronizing, and it's the worst form of trash talk. So I know what you're doing. I read between the lines. Hey, let's start with Kamala Harris. Last night, Joey, Kamala Harris, CNN town hall. Interestingly for me, I have some real thoughts on what it revealed about skills and politics. It didn't reveal much about policy and Kamala Harris. But let's take a look at a moment last night. And Willisha boys in New York, pick whichever you want. I want to dive into Kamala Harris and Anderson Cooper. Listen.
Is a border wall stupid?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and that border wall. So remember, Donald Trump said Mexico would pay for it? Come on, they didn't. How much of that wall did he build? I think the last number I saw is about 2%. And then when it came time for him to do a photo op, you know where he did it? In the part of the wall that President Obama built. Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occur.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about it. He didn't actually do much of anything.
But you do want to build some wall.
I want to strengthen our border.
All right. First of all, I want to be consistent, Joey. I've said on this program, and I've tried to, I hope, enlighten the audience on what I think makes for a good interview, a good conversation. And it is the follow-up. So in order to follow up, you have to listen, okay? You can't just ask your pre-scripted questions, and there's no perfectly drafted question to get an answer. So you have to follow up. And so I want to give credit to Anderson Cooper. He followed up, I would say, 2 to 3 times on a very pointed question, you support the border wall. Now, I have a lot of analysis myself, Joey, on, again, the skills and what we saw there when it comes to Kamala Harris. But your thoughts?
Yeah, before I was the one asking questions, filling in for you and Pete, I was the guy answering questions as an analyst or a contributor for Fox. And I always had this joke. I'd say, listen, don't answer the question you're asked. Answer the question you want to answer. Well, there's an art and a skill to that as a communicator, and especially someone trying to convince people, because if it's too obvious that you're completely avoiding the question, then you're not answering anything. So he essentially asked her, you said building this wall was stupid, and now you're advocating for policy or legislation that would build this wall. What changed your mind? Do you now support the wall? And what does she say? She says, well, Trump didn't build the wall. And it's like, okay, well, it may be raining in Texas, but I've got to worry about the weather here today. And the idea is, regardless of what Trump did or didn't do, what is your policy and where do you stand and why do you stand there? And a lot of what she had to say, a lot of us could push back on. I know the border wall fight that Trump and Pelosi had pretty well. And the reason, what makes the border wall so much of a topic, and I appreciate Anderson for honing in on it, is not the wall itself, but it's what it has symbolized throughout this fight since the Bush years. This idea that Democrats use the wall as a scapegoat to get out of fixing immigration, and Republicans really built their entire immigration policy on the wall. And this idea that Trump offered Nancy Pelosi DACA reform, visa reform, dreamers in exchange for funding the border wall, and Pelosi couldn't let him have a win that was so intrinsically tied to his campaign that she went and found a way to get DACA through the Supreme Court, and he went and found a way to fund the border wall through the military funding. And in doing so, those other issues when it came to immigration didn't get touched at all. And so the reason why the border wall is so important is you have to go back to those Democrats that supported Pelosi in killing this deal over the idea that a wall is optically horrible and inhumane and all those things. If now they're saying, you know what, we're okay with the wall as long as we're the ones building it. And also, however much of the wall Trump built, yards of steel set to rust once Biden and Kamala took over. They had a chance to build infinite amounts of border wall with the money and material sitting there. So it's important to ask her about it. She can't answer it, man. She can't answer it. She can't answer critical questions.
She can't answer it, Joey. And now I want to tell you what I think and get your response. It's going to tie into what you had to say. And part of it is not unique to Kamala Harris. And part of it is unique to Kamala Harris. Let's start with the part that is not unique to Kamala Harris. What you said you learned when you first started appearing on Fox and in media as a guest is exactly what is said to all politicians in media training. It does not matter what you are asked. Answer what you want to say. So that part is not unique to Kamala Harris. And it's not even unique to politicians, but it's exacerbated with politicians. So what I'm getting at is a question is asked, some perfunctory acknowledgement of the question is made, and a pivot is made into the direction of where you want to go. Okay, so she says something like, this is the actual skills in play now. I'm glad you asked about immigration, Anderson. Okay, I didn't ask about immigration. I asked about the border wall. But at that point, she says, and she did it with Brett Baer as well, I'm glad you asked about immigration. And then after having acknowledged the question as though you are now answering it, you pivot over into talking about Trump and his border wall. There's some unique stuff to Kamala Harris buried in there, Joey, that I think is fascinating. The laugh, the 2% joke that no one else is laughing along with, the nodding. And if you're listening on radio, you can picture this in your mind. She does it a lot. She nods when she is talking. Those are things she's doing, Joey, in my mind, to solicit agreement from either the audience or from the interviewer. She nods and laughs to pull them to her side. Now, she's not particularly good at it. That's where there's a lack of skill. And she's pretty transparent in the fact that she's pivoting away from answering the question. We can all see it. I actually think the casual observer can see it and hear it, that that's what she's doing. But again, what's on display in that clip is Anderson followed up 2-3 times, and you can see her each time make that calculation. And things fall by the wayside, right? She stops the laughing and the nodding. She realizes now, I'm not pulling him onto my side. And so he says, I think for the third time, but you're for a border wall. And she's the cornered animal that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the media. She's out. The third follow-up, she's run through everything that she's been taught, everything pre-scripted, every skill and technique has now been exhausted, and she's stuck with a simple statement of, I'm for fixing the problem, which everyone knows rings hollow and doesn't get you anywhere and is certainly not on point to, but now you're for a border wall?
Yeah, well, you like to be fair and you like to have debate on this show. You like to have a conversation that we would have if nobody were watching. Here's the truth. President Trump talks in exaggerated hyperbole. He talks like a New York City real estate developer. I'm going to build that building, and it's going to be the most beautiful and biggest building you've ever seen. The words beautiful and biggest are descriptors. They're not literal. President Trump talks in policy the same way. And it's baked into who he is because the American people receive that as authentic. They see him say that, and they can translate it without needing a translator. You can criticize that. It's absolutely fair game to criticize that. When he says, I'm taking all the troops out of Afghanistan, and then later you learn that in his mind, that means we're not going to have combat in Afghanistan anymore. You can criticize that. That's okay. But the majority of Americans, and at least all those on the right, they understand his words for what they are, not the literal interpretation. So the reason why I bring that up is if you're going to give grace to one, you got to give grace to the other. It's if Kamala Harris doesn't want to give a strict policy answer to a strict policy question, fair enough. If you ask President Trump how he fixes the economy, he talks about energy, and he really doesn't go beyond that. He really doesn't. I mean, now to his credit, he says that is the root to all evil on the economy, but he doesn't go into how you get the interest rates down and how you change inflation overnight and how you change the housing market and things like that and how you change resourcing materials from countries that are adversarial. He says, listen, we're going to get the energy down, and that's going to open it up. Kamala Harris doesn't have that. She doesn't have that authentic way of pivoting. She doesn't have that authentic way of bringing in a talking point that resonates with her base and is attractive to independents, that may not touch the heart of the question, but touches the hearts of people who are listening. She doesn't have that. Right. It's either a communication style she's missing, or she's over-rehearsed, or she literally, what it looks like, and I heard someone on Fox and Friends this morning, because I was listening to the radio, kind of critiquing, she doesn't have that fallback answer to questions that are difficult and she doesn't want to answer.
Well, okay, Joey, but here's why. And I'm glad you brought up Trump. Okay, she's playing. So I just laid out for you that she's not a skilled, let's use a metaphor, card player. She's not good at poker, okay?
Sure.
But there's another complicating factor here. She has a losing hand. She's not sitting on a winning hand, so she can't play this game easily, and she's not skilled to get out of a losing hand. So this is a loser of a question for her because they have tape from 2019 where she says a border wall is stupid. She has been the vice president for 3.5 years with border policies that have exacerbated it through executive actions. And so she has a losing hand. So her goal going in, I think, Joey, is to do what we now have all described as a word salad. And this is the part that's not unique to her.
Yeah.
I think that's most politicians. Most politicians, including Republicans, often don't want to answer the question. They want to do what you said earlier. I want to pivot to my talking points, Republican and Democrat. Trump, and this is why I say I'm glad you brought up Trump. He broke the mold, Joey. He did. Like, okay, yes, you're right. He's guilty of exaggeration and hyperbole. He's also guilty of the weave, which some see as a vice. He and I, for that matter, see as a virtue, an entertaining virtue, the weave. But he does, despite his hyperbole and despite the weave, answer the question directly. Like he does, he's there. He meets the person where they are. And that's changed the game, at least for the moment. We'll see about for the long term. But, you know, he is so direct uniquely, and she is so not uniquely indirect that we all call it a word salad. The truth is every politician is a word salad. Most of them are. That's absolutely true. She's just bad at it. She's really bad at it. And I had a friend this morning. I had a friend this morning, Joey, say, and again, this won't be as obvious to the people listening on radio or podcast, but it's all in her eyes, Joey. Like, look at that. Let's do this. Let's play another Kamala Harris clip. And I want you to watch her eyes if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. It's the follow-up, man. Her eyes look one way when she's on that talking point. When the follow-up comes, watch her eyes change. It tells the game and shows, oh my gosh, I got a bad hand and I don't know how to play poker. Here's another Kamala Harris.
Is there something you can point to in your life, political life or in your life in the last 4 years, that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes. And they range from, you know, if you've ever parented a child, you know you make lots of mistakes, too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well-versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well-versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
Mm-hmm.
So her biggest mistake is I'm too much of a perfectionist.
I heard a self-own at the end. It's a mistake to not be prepared to answer a question. As she is answering a question, she was obviously not prepared to answer. Like the irony there is just dripping. And look, if you ask President Trump, I know what his answer is going to be. It's going to be no. It's just simply going to be no.
Yeah,
I didn't make any mistakes.
He's not going to.
But there's confidence and authenticity there. She didn't even go that far.
Well, if we are being fair, everybody makes mistakes, but Trump will not acknowledge a mistake.
No.
I don't know what his answer would have been to that question. He won't even really say Fauci was a mistake. I don't know what his answer would be to that question. But the thing about it is, he would address it directly. He may say, I don't know, not many mistakes. And in her eyes, she's lost. She's lost in this moment. Now, what does that mean? Look, what does that mean? Is that just, media training? Is this, fun navel gazing about a town hall? Well, to me, the bigger takeaway, Joey, is it's like a bad salesman who gives you the pitch on a car and you have a suspicion that it's a lemon. In this case, the analogy for politics would be, you're phony, you're lying to me about your policies. And the minute you start asking some specific questions about the engine or the mileage, you can see in his eyes and you can see in his demeanor, now the fraud is exposed. And I think that's the bigger takeaway with all of this when it comes to Kamala. Her bad poker hand is, she's being phony. She's not for a border wall. She's not for all of these policies. She is who she was in 2019, and she's trying to pretend with her bad hand that she's somebody else running for president.
I take an even deeper analysis of it. I see it as scary because when you ask her a question that she doesn't have a rehearsed or researched answer for, that's when intuition kicks in. That's when experience kicks in. You should be able to navigate that trap based on all the other moments in your life you're in a similar situation. That's what communication is. It's also how you make decisions. So if you put her in the situation room and she's about to give the green light to sending rockets from a ship into Gaza so that we can get some hostages out of there, and somebody comes in and says, hang on just a second, we just got this piece of information, completely changes the script. How does she work her way through that? Her ability to analyze and process information on the spot and arrive at a conclusion is important to me if she's going to lead my country in a time of what looks like war on all continents. And so, I'm not trying to blow up her answer to a question like, have you made a mistake? But all I have is the opportunity to analyze how she makes decisions and what she'll do in situations based on what she gives me. And this interview, unfortunately, is one of those precious pieces that she's given me because she hasn't done a lot of stuff to show her ability to make a decision on the spot. If you look back at even the debate, they followed script. Even though it wasn't extra friendly to her, they followed script for her pretty well. So you didn't get a lot of those moments. But now in these interviews, you get a few of them here and there to where you have to look and say, when she's thrown a curveball, does she just swing or does she watch it? They're bringing a sports analogy. And does she learn it for the next time it comes? The evidence is she doesn't, and that's what concerns me. Listen, there's no way I'm going to sit here and tell you that I think President Trump's going to bat 1,000 and make the right decision every time. But I do not, or rather not, make a decision. And that's enough sometimes.
That's a great point regarding the revelation about what it means about in-the-moment decisions. All right, I want to pivot to this. Joey is a well-known, I would say, gun expert, both in practical usage and in hobby. And he's had a life experience, again, both personally and professionally with firearms. I found this, Joey, as someone who's only ever done this as a hobbyist, but over a lifetime of at least being around, firearms as a generality, mostly shotguns, some handguns, and to a lesser extent, rifles. I found this pretty eye-opening, and it's really getting no coverage. So, Senate candidate from Missouri, Lucas Kuntz, is running against Josh Hawley. He was visited by Adam Kinzinger, former Republican, and they went to a range, and there were reporters. So it was a political stunt. It was designed for publicity. They have ARs, and they're shooting. And I think we have some pictures we can share on the screen. And for anyone listening on radio, again, it's Kinzinger and Kuntz at a makeshift range of some sort. It looks like cans. Really, I'm going to try to be accurate, not hyperbolic in any way, Joey. 15 yards away, maybe 15 yards away from the shooter.
About 10 or under. It looks pretty short, and it looks like there's some steel plate targets there. Is there steel plate targets hanging underneath those bars? Maybe there is. I can't see the picture you're looking at, but I know the pictures he posted, and there were some steel targets and then like some bottles or cans as well. Exactly. Okay. And it shows them shooting at, let's call it 10 yards distance into at least cans and possibly some steel plates as well. Well, what happened is, and I don't know the facts completely, Joey, on whether or not this was shrapnel or a bullet, but a journalist covering this, taking photos, I believe, could have been a print journalist, took a hit. He's bleeding from his arm. He's triaged up there. And Kuntz bragged about this, Joey, on social media, like, great day at the range, always bring your first aid kit. It's stunning to me. Again, and this is where I defer to you. I mean, the distance, the targets, the firearm chosen at that distance, and somebody was wounded in some way. I don't know, man. Dick Cheney shot a guy in the face, and that was a big deal and should have been a big deal. Seems to me a big deal. There's surface level and deeper, right? Surface level is you look like an idiot for using a scoped AR to shoot a target 10 yards away, right? You look like you don't know much about guns. The deeper part here is that when you don't know enough to even know what you should be embarrassed about to begin with, like he posted that because he has no understanding that the people out there with guns and that go to ranges understand that what you shoot at with a pistol, which is a big bulky bullet, not going that fast at 10 yards, is not what you shoot at with a rifle, which is an ergonomic bullet going a lot faster and designed with properties to do to come apart when it hits something harder than itself. So the idea here is the safety concerns in shooting at a steel plate at 10 yards with a rifle is basic level understanding of what you're shooting at, and how to do it safely. You're trying to do a photo op to say, hey, I'm a Democrat, but I do guns too. And in doing your photo op, making a mistake, and then posting that mistake online, all you do is further drill down to the point that it's all a photo op. You don't know anything about guns. Chances are when you get in the office, you won't have any qualms with taking those guns away, because you obviously don't have any passion for them or understanding of those that do. And it really just shows this facade that politicians put out there. When Kelly Loeffler ran for Senate here in Georgia, she goes and buys a $2,000 Filson outfit and hires somebody to take pictures of her in a cornfield with a gun and says she can hunt. People see right through that, people see right through that. That doesn't appeal to anyone. And she was a Republican. I bring that up because we're fair and balanced. Be who you are. President Trump doesn't go out and take a picture next to a deer. He's never hunted probably a day in his life, and that's okay, because his sons do. He's connected to the issue that way, and we get it. President Trump and I, when it comes to defining masculinity, are on two ends of a spectrum. He's worn a suit his whole life. He probably doesn't have a callus on his hands, but he knows how to walk into a room and own it and be the mean guy when he needs to get what he needs out of it to take care of his family. I, on the other hand, couldn't make my weight in a boardroom probably, but I can go out and swing an axe or use a shovel, and I know how to do those things. Own who you are in the space you're trying to work in. I've known Adam Kinzinger for more than 10 years. When he was on the Hill in D.C., he was a frat boy. He hung around with Duncan Hunter and Murphy from Pennsylvania. Look them up. They both left D.C. ashamed of everything they've done because they didn't handle themselves well. And he was right there in the mix with them. And I bring that up because he tries to have this moral authority on social media and in his new role as this like Republican heel on the Democrat networks. And like, man, don't throw stones from glass houses, bro. You're not relevant enough for any of these people to throw them back, or you'd be in a bad place right now. There's plenty of reputation on Adam Kinzinger to take that away in a heartbeat. And so, if you're running for office against Josh Hawley, I don't know, maybe talk about policy. Maybe don't go do a photo op in a world that you don't participate in, where somebody could get hurt in.
Is this a naive assumption that the guys who served in the military, Adam Kinzinger, Tim Walz, I would assume have more familiarity with firearms? And that doesn't mean every firearm. I know that Tim Walz probably didn't handle 12-gauge shotguns in the military. I would think that Adam Kinzinger had some familiarity with a rifle. But I'm a little surprised at both of their buffoonery when it comes to firearms.
Yeah, listen, the Marine Corps is the one exception, and that guy's a Marine Corps veteran, so shame on him. The Marine Corps has a standard that no matter what your job is, you qualify on the rifle range the same way everybody else, to include those in the infantry, do at least once a year. The other services don't have that strict standard. Adam Kinzinger was an Air Force pilot, which means I don't know if he ever qualified with a rifle. He at least qualified probably with a pistol, and maybe he qualified with a rifle once in early training, and it's over a couple of days, and he might not have revisited that skill set or that weapon again for the rest of his career. Same thing with Tim Walz. I mean, he was in a ground combat unit at some point, but if he spent all of his time in the National Guard getting ready to run for office, once you get high enough in rank, it's pretty easy to kind of not go to the range that day. And so, at the end of the day, I learned more about guns getting out of the Marine Corps and becoming a hunter than I knew in the Marine Corps. I knew the weapon systems I used in the Marine Corps, and I learned principles of shooting that apply to everything, but I didn't learn every type of weapon out there. And I certainly didn't learn the stuff that we normally use to hunt with. I had to learn that once I got out. I had to make friends and be invested in the culture. And that's what makes this so aggravating for those of us that advocate for the Second Amendment is you have so many politicians up there holding up diagrams that aren't even accurate, trying to ban a weapon. They don't understand what characteristics make it that weapon to begin with. And Adam Kinzinger and now this guy in Missouri are doing the same thing.
All right, here comes the weave. I promised we'd return to this. If you are interested in hearing both Joey and I on the naked, ugly face of the panic when it comes to Donald Trump. Stick around for just a few minutes while I weave into. I actually am looking forward to a rematch between Georgia and Texas. I feel pretty good, Joey. Now, first to the schedule. Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Kentucky, not the layups we thought they might be. The schedule not quite as easy as someone had suggested. There's also lurking out there a big rivalry game with a team that's currently only has one loss on their record, and that's Texas A&M. I feel pretty confident in the record and the test. The Texas that was on display against Georgia, here's what I think. This is a quick tangent into serious football, I think. I text you that night, your defense is really good. Your running game is pretty good. I think Texas's defense showed itself to be really good in that game. I mean, they gave up 30 points, but those were like on drives of 30 yards, 13 yards. Yeah, because the offense for Texas was so bad. Yeah, because the offense was so bad. And I just have to believe that with Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers, maybe Arch Manning, and all the weapons, that there can be a different Texas offense, even with a very good defense from Georgia. So, man, I'm ready for that rematch. And by the way, I think you should be concerned about your quarterback. I think you should have some real concerns about Carson Beck.
I'll give you the funny and serious answer. Carson Beck dates one of those twins that are like Instagram, TikTok famous. They play volleyball or basketball or something at some college.
Cavender twins?
He's going around making TikTok videos with her, driving a Lamborghini Urus sports car, and he needs to get his mind back in football. He needs to be humbled. He needs her to break up with him. He needs the car to blow a tire, and he needs to be on Shoe Leather Express, walking to practice with nothing else to worry about. Because, I mean, let's face it, he's not the most attractive guy. He needs to be good at football to keep those things, and he needs to understand that. So I agree with you completely. He needs to refocus. Now, he's shown in years past he has the skill set, but there's a difference between knowing you have the ability and executing it. This is what I'll tell you, my analysis of that game. These are NFL teams. It's good on good, first, second, third string. The talent's there, the experience may not be. The difference between a Super Bowl winning team coming in and scoring 30 points and a Super Bowl capable team coming in and scoring 15 points might be misunderstanding one formation that other team does. I mean, when they're that good, you can blow the doors off quickly and you can recover quickly. A 15-30 game between Texas and Georgia could have been a 30-28 game, a 45-30 game where Texas wins just as easily with one of those turnovers not happening. So when you have two teams that are that good and both quarterbacks struggle with holding on to the ball, the score is not indicative of where those teams are. I think this is the best thing Texas could have had.
And to the point that you're making, I'll tell you one place that Georgia absolutely dominated Texas, coaching. Kirby Smart's defense was genius and shut down this genius of Steve Sarkisian. Okay, there we go. That is until next time, which next time will hopefully be in the SEC championship game, Georgia, Texas. Okay, finally, Joe, you and I were both pretty fired up last night, and you were really fired up, and I really appreciated it from you. So yesterday, The Atlantic reports that Donald Trump praises Hitler's generals. I said they've thrown the kitchen sink at Donald Trump today. Well, they ran out seemingly in fulfillment of Mark Halpern's prediction that there was some sex story that could bomb Donald Trump's campaign. We're going to get to that in a moment here on the Will Cain Show. But they also ran out an Atlantic story where Donald Trump praises Hitler. Every news cycle, everyone is running with basically Donald Trump is Hitler today. But also in that article was a story about Donald Trump offering to pay for the funeral of a fallen soldier, female, Mexican-American, and when he got the bill, suppose he said $60,000, it doesn't cost that much to bury a Mexican. That's the story. Now, to that fallen soldier, Vanessa Guillen, her family, has come out and go, no, that is no way how our interactions went with Donald Trump. There's no way I believe that story to be true, so forth. Well, Joey, this was shocking, and I pulled the tweet because this is the one that set you off, and it really inflamed me as well. This is George Conway, former Republican strategist, Lincoln Project, so forth. He tweeted, "No one is exploiting your sister's death here." This is in direct response, as you know, Joey, to Maya Guillen, Vanessa's sister. He says to her on X, "No one is exploiting your sister's death here. This isn't about her. It's about Trump's sociopathic behavior. He displays it publicly and privately in his contempt for anyone else's lives, including those of men and women in uniform who made the ultimate sacrifice. And that's apparent to anyone who chooses, unlike you, to open their eyes. George Conway lecturing a Gold Star family. And while he was the worst of it, Joey, I feel like he wasn't alone. The author of the article, Jeffrey Goldberg, also kind of took this tact, like Gold Star families don't know what they're talking about in this situation. And Joe, this is me, like, this is the corner to animal analogy. This is the wild animal backed into a corner. How does it react? This is panic. I feel like what we're witnessing is panic. They're losing to Trump. I think they're throwing everything against the wall to see what will stick. And they're lashing out at anybody that's like, no, that doesn't stick.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that really kind of pissed me off about this. Number one, George Conway knows better. He's been around forever. He's probably 40 years older than that girl that he's typing to on Twitter. And it's just the idea that this 40 years older man who has an established platform of millions of followers is choosing that for his partisan target, a young lady who lost her sister. And let me explain to the audience that's listening, Vanessa didn't die on the battlefield. Vanessa was murdered by another soldier. All right. When we talk about reforms that need to happen, all right, President Trump is willing to challenge any general in the military if he feels like their ego and their political priorities are outweighing how the military should perform and will perform. That's huge for people like Vanessa that are murdered by someone that might not should have been in that unit to begin with, that had a history of being told on for beating somebody up or being mean to her. I forgot exactly what his history was. Every single leader, it's not just the actual operational.
Joey's breaking up a little bit here. We're having some connection troubles.
And so for Vanessa's sister, there's probably an even deeper concern here on getting President Trump elected, because she sees the army that her sister was eventually serving in, and it's not a good one. And so if you take all of the George Conway and these political, asshats out of it that are just really showing their butt, there's actually an issue here worth talking about. President Trump is crass, but look at the military when he was in office. Look at the VA when he was in office. I don't care if he said suckers and losers at all, because I don't know what context that was in. I could see him looking there and going, they treated these guys like suckers and losers. Or, these guys died in Vietnam and they were taken for suckers and losers. I don't know. I got to put that man in context on anything he says. We just talked about the hyperbole he uses. And quite honestly, I could care less if he has reverence for my service. If him being president means I can go get medical care through the VA choice rather than at a VA that is so bureaucratically stagmired or quagmired that I can't do anything with it. I don't care if he likes me. I don't care if we have the same hobbies or share the same sentiment. I care about the policies he puts in place. And even if he just puts them in place because he likes me and popular, they're effective. Let's go. And I think that's what Vanessa's sister's saying.
Something interesting you said about the suckers and losers, which I just don't believe. But even if I were to believe that those words crossed his lips, to your point, Joey, I would need to almost hear it directly, like see the video, understand the context, because at this point, It's such a boy who cries wolf syndrome on anything that Trump says that I would be curious, well, what did he say, as you point out, in context, or what did he say directly before and after that? Just between bloodbath and dictator for a day and very fine people, I don't believe any hearsay / report on something that he said unless I get to see the entirety of what he said. And I also think his behavior as president doesn't back up that would be what he would say exactly as you report that he said it. But and a great point on Vanessa and the deeper lying issues. I just think, to me, we've reached this wild moment now, this wild moment in the election. And it's characterized finally by how this story from the Atlantic is playing out in the wider ecosphere, and what I think reeks of panic. And I'll give you Kamala Harris, who tweeted the following yesterday. She tweeted out, Donald Trump is out for unchecked power. He wants a military like Adolf Hitler had, who will be loyal to him, not our Constitution. He is unhinged, unstable, and given a second term, there would be no one to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses. I mean, it is now, Joey. I think the brakes are off, and there's still 2 weeks to go. I don't even know how much more you can ramp it up, but there is no civility. There is no temperance. There is no attempt for accuracy. I think both from the candidate and the surrounding media support chamber, it's now a train without brakes. And I don't know what this train crashes into in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it crashes into one of two scenarios. Either Donald Trump wins in a proverbial landslide, taking pretty much every swing state. If it's close, I think Kamala Harris wins. And I can't really substantiate why I think that, but I don't think he wins a close race, because I think it really comes down to, are people buying off on this threat to democracy or not? Because that's really the hanging out there part. There aren't a lot of arguing over the economy was better under Trump. The border was better under Trump. We had less wars under Trump. Kamala Harris has put all of her eggs in this basket of, yeah, our policies have, but I'll do better on that if you'll just believe me that he is the embodiment. And I guess if she can convince people of that, then, maybe it is close and she wins. But I just don't see people buying that. I don't see people, honestly, I think most people think most politicians are kind of scummy. And I don't know how saying that guy's scummy is a way to convince them to vote for you, because they're probably already thinking about you. I mean, in my world, in my social world, that's how we interpret the majority of politicians. It's the rare ones that seem authentic and seem like good people that stand out, because the default is you're probably scummy. So if your best argument is this guy's a crony, well, you know what? To go up there with all the rest of the cronies, right?
He is the author of Unbroken Bonds of Battle. He's a big fan of the Georgia Bulldogs. He is a Fox News contributor. He's my friend Joey Jones. All right, man, I really appreciate all the time, and I appreciate all of the analysis here today on the Will Cain Show. Take care, Joey.
Go Dogs.
It's interesting that Kamala Harris's closing argument, as Joey points out, is that Donald Trump is akin to Hitler and a threat to democracy. When Joe Biden exited the race and was running that same theme, Kamala Harris tried a new theme. She tried joy. She tried substance to some extent. They retired threat to democracy. This was about in August, around Labor Day, because internal polling reportedly showed it wasn't working. It's not working to continually call him a threat to democracy. What more, it's led to 2 assassination attempts on his life. It's interesting now that every card having been played, again, these bad poker players, the final card they're reaching for is the one they already suspected was a loser. They're going back to threat to democracy. They're going back to Hitler. What does that mean? Throwing the kitchen sink at Hitler? We'll tell you the bombshell that was supposed to end Trump. Next on the Will Cain Show.
I'm Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will gravitate toward this podcast too. Every Monday, I'm going to talk to people I trust in politics as they tell me what they're seeing and thinking in the 2024 election cycle. As they prep me to cover the upcoming election, they'll prep you, the voters, too. Make sure you subscribe to this series on foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
We're bringing forecasting grit to the gridiron. Fox Weather is storming the field with the risk of weather impact on the hottest NFL matchups all season long, delivering unmatched insight from the leader in weather news and how the forecast could affect your favorite players. We are taking you right into the end zone with Fox Weather's exclusive weather forecasting technology and the risk of weather impact for every single game of the regular season. Listen to Storming the Field every Friday on foxnewspodcasts.com.
It is time to take the quiz.
5 days a week, it's 5 questions in less than 5 minutes. We ask people on the streets of New York City to play along. Let's see how you do.
Including the pre-Super Bowl era, what NFL franchise has won the most NFL championships?
I'm going to say the Cowboys.
I guess I would say the Packers.
How'd you do? Exactly. These get tougher, so hang on.
Make sure you take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox. Thank you for taking the quiz.
What is a bombshell? What could end Trump? It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com on the Fox News YouTube channel. Click on the text description underneath this live stream. Streaming every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time. And there's a little button with subscribe to the Will Cain Show. Hit subscribe, or if you're listening on radio, head over to Spotify or Apple and hit subscribe to the Will Cain Show. Journalist Mark Halpern suggested a few days ago that a story was being shopped around that could end Donald Trump. He said he didn't necessarily believe the story, and it had been passed on by the likes of CBS and CNN and other legacy mainstream outlets. There was a sense of anticipation, perhaps doom. What could this possibly be? What could it be, this bombshell? It was not the story from The Atlantic suggesting that Trump once again likes Hitler. And on that note, just as a side note, but I think a good little historical tangent. I keep seeing this and I keep thinking, even when you hear it from, the types like Adam Kinzinger, Republicans who somehow think Trump is beyond the pale, I want to say, I remember when George W. Bush was Hitler. Like, I remember that. Anyone else listening or watching remember that? I'm not talking figuratively. I'm talking rhetorically. Literally, they said George W. Bush is Hitler. I remember Mitt Romney being turned into a private school bully, forced other boys down, cut their hair, and strapped his dog to his roof. Didn't go so far as to say he's Hitler, but definitely said he had binders full of women and he hated black people. I just remember that the people you celebrate today, like the Cheneys, yesterday were Darth Vader. And it's not just my memory in my lifetime. I think that some historical context might be good. I think everyone listening, if you're on the fence, or better yet, if you're for Kamala Harris, or you have a friend who makes the argument that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, I just want to see what you think. Drop into the comments. Let me know what you think. When I share with you this bit of historical context, this is a headline from the New York Times from 1948. 1948. Headline reads, President likens Dewey to Hitler as fascist tool. Says when bigots, profiteers get control of country, they select, quote, frontman to rule dictatorship. Stressed Truman tells Chicago audience that a Republican victory will threaten U.S. liberty. Truman says GOP perils U.S. liberty. Back in the day, New York Times headlines were very long. But back in the day, the message was still the same. Harry Truman, Democrat, run against Thomas Dewey, Republican. And what does Truman accuse of Dewey? Fascism, bigot, Hitler. Nothing new is under the sun, not even the tax against Donald Trump. The bombshell that Halpern promised us seems to have been, perhaps, but I'm actually skeptical, seems to have been a story that dropped in The Guardian after CBS, CNN, and all of our legacy mainstream media outlets rejected the story. A second-tier, third-tier journalistic enterprise, The Guardian, accepts a story from a 1990s model who says she was with Jeffrey Epstein walking down the street when he said, let's go to Trump's place. She goes with Epstein to Trump's place and is groped by Trump. That's the story. A couple of interesting notes. I've seen it suggested the year she put that she was walking from Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion was 93. He didn't buy it until 96. She went on, confirmed, to work for Obama, this model, as something like a clean air czar, climate something for Obama. It's unsourced. It's not credible. No one believes it. No one's really much even talking about it. And it made me wonder, is this what Halpern is talking about? Like, if true, it could end Trump's campaign? I got to thinking, like, why would someone think this could end Trump's campaign? Is it the connection to Epstein? Like, the effort in the last 2 weeks will be to connect him to somebody like Epstein and to Hitler? I'm serious when I ask you this, and I ask you boys in New York, like, what would, let's step aside for a moment. Just analyze the public for a minute. What would serve as a bombshell? Because what I would offer you is, even if this story were true, right, and there's no suggestion that it is true, I don't think it meets the standard laid out by Halpern. I don't think, if true, it would end Donald Trump. And I think that for a couple of reasons. Well, first of all, I think the public is totally desensitized to these attacks. And specifically when it comes to, Trump is whatever he is with women. It's just been done. So there's no new one that you're going to run out. Also, by the way, same thing, boy who cried wolf scenario. There have been so many fake stories, so much misinformation that no one's actually going to believe it, even if true, at this point. And by the way, that cynicism's earned. That's not an indictment on MAGA. That's an indictment on the storyteller. That's an indictment on the boy, not the wolf. That's an indictment on the media. But I would even say to you this. I don't know what kind of story would serve. Like, that's going to do it. Like, just as a thought exercise, two things. What if it's like Trump with a minor? I don't know. Okay, then you're like, well, but prove it to me. That's a hell of an allegation. Prove it to me. And then I saw Glenn Beck say this yesterday. At this point, and I'm serious about this because I think this is important for all of us going forward. All of us. Obviously, we don't trust the storyteller. I don't trust somebody telling me what Trump said. I don't trust somebody telling me what Trump did. Okay, Will, what if there were a video of it? Whatever the allegation is. What if there's a video of it? And this is what I saw Glenn Beck say. I do now live in the age of AI. Like, what am I supposed to do with a video? Of course, like, my inclination for most of my life is I believe a video. I believe it. But, like, is that not changed, like, in the past 6 months? Like, in the last 6 months of our life, all of us, like, no video, no proof, no belief. All of a sudden, now I'm like, well, if there's video, do I even believe? We're in a totally new age, and I don't know what could end Trump. Go ahead, James.
I think the only thing that story would have maybe ended it or at least gotten the margins different was if it was irrefutable evidence that he was in on what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And my guess is that that's the way the story was pitched to everyone, proof that Trump and Epstein were in it together. Yeah. And you could tell that's kind of what the story alluded to, but the language in the story on The Guardian was so watered down that they didn't even fully go there. They just kind of said, maybe. And of course, they water it down because they don't want to open themselves up to a defamation suit.
But also, okay, if that's the allegation that is a bombshell that, quote unquote, would be true, right? And I don't know what source of proof would serve that we could all come to agreement, oh my gosh, this could be actually true, right? But let's say that existed. Trump is somehow irrefutably connected to Epstein. Then there's the timing. If that's true, why did that not come out for the past decade? And why would that not come out until 2 weeks before an election? Further making us believe, I don't believe it's true. Like, the motivations are too stark and too clear. And by the way, we can be adults. We all know, everyone listening, everyone watching. Well, a political operative that had this proof would hold it. If they had that proof, they might hold it. Okay, but would a journalist hold it? Yeah. Would a journalist participate? And then the journalist isn't a storyteller. They're not a reporter. They're part of a political agenda if they're willing to hold it, right? They're not a trustworthy source or storyteller. They're an operative. And so I think the whole thing of timing impugns as well the truth. Go ahead, Tinfoil Pat.
So I think, you're right about timing, but what you said earlier about Harris kind of being an old school politician, I think she's playing by old rules. And so something like an October surprise this close to the election day, that could actually have a major impact. But now the fact that everything's going so fast and people need time to really focus on it, in order to get those connections of Trump to Hitler or Trump to Epstein, you need to really punch that for a couple months in order to get it into people's psychology.
Do you think that's unique? Here's a thought exercise. Is that unique to Trump? If it were Glenn Youngkin as candidate for president, Virginia governor, Republican, and then something like this happened. I see your salute, James. Jesus. If something like this happened, could this old rule that you're talking about, Patrick, end Glenn Youngkin but can't end Trump? You see what I'm saying? Have the rules changed, or is it the character? It's unique to Trump. Go ahead, Dan.
I think it's the character. I mean, I think anybody else, any of these things would have taken him down. He's above any of these things at this point. Not that he should be or anything like that, but I mean,
nobody should be. I know, Dan, you want to be fair, but here's the thing: I know you want to be fair, and I know you want, that also you don't, and I like to acknowledge bias. So you don't lean as far as I do to the right, But the cynicism and why these things don't stick is not about Trump. It's about everyone else, the storyteller. It's the boy. It's not the wolf. You see what I'm saying? No one should believe anything about Trump. And the thing is, those same people would be the ones telling us about Youngkin. But with Trump, we have a decade of obviousness, not only on the agenda, but on the lack of trustworthiness from the boy, right? What I'm curious about is if it goes to a Youngkin or DeSantis or whatever it may be, do the old rules come back that Patrick's talking about? Does the public, and I'm not talking about somebody that's already on the right, the swingable vote, trust the storyteller now? Or is the storyteller's credibility permanently burned, and it would apply to anyone, even someone not named Donald Trump? Go ahead, James.
I think prior to this election cycle, people knew CNN and MSNBC were biased, but CBS, ABC, and NBC, to the everyday voter, still had that veneer of they're just kind of the straight 6 o'clock news. And I heard from a lot of Democrats after the 2 debates in the fall that were saying, hey, they were saying, hey, we thought our candidate either won or didn't do as well as we thought, and Trump was horrible. But yeah, those moderators were really biased. And I think that goes away and kind of seeping that into the public's narrative that, oh, wait, right, we might have a media bias problem.
But it's also not just the storyteller, it's exhaustion. It's the umpteenth story with Trump, right? And how many of them have been proven false and so forth, and or not to matter to people. So it's like the umpteenth story with Trump with someone new like a Youngkin or DeSantis, if it were like the first time you ever heard some explosive thing about him and it was somehow true. And by the way, the truth should be analyzed with skepticism, just like with Trump, still because of the storyteller. But the novelty of it might have a bigger impact. I don't know. The long and short of this, what I'm getting at is I can't believe this would be the bombshell hinted at by Halpern. And what I would suggest is the kitchen sink has been thrown, but that doesn't mean there's nothing left. They're going to clean out the cabinet, like I said earlier. Get ready for the Windex, the wrench, even the piping underneath the sink is going to be thrown, I would imagine, on a 48-hour cycle over the next 2 weeks. Let's break down if it's affecting the independent voter in Pennsylvania. David Marcus coming up on The Will Cain Show.
Stay on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
That heat's going to be out there for one more day.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com.
Will Howard and Ohio State take on Nebraska. The best pregame, the best announcers, the biggest games. Big noon Saturday, noon Eastern on Fox.
We're bringing the thunder to football. Fox Weather is storming the field with the risk of weather impact on the hottest NFL games this season. Listen to Storming the Field every Friday on foxnewspodcasts.com.
I'm Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my podcast, Perino on Politics. It's the final countdown, and both campaigns are working hard to appeal to voters in crucial battleground states. I'm joined by my friend, former White House press secretary, head of Ari Fleischer Communications, Ari Fleischer himself. Available now on foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
It is on. Panic. Wildcat fighting out of the corner. It is on. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. Every week we've been checking in with Fox News columnist David Marcus. He's been on the road in various states across the United States, checking in with independent voters. He's back from smoke break, forced to listen in to my wandering and meandering, navel-gazing thoughts about America. And now he's here to tell us the real thoughts of America. David Marcus on the Will Cain Show. What's up, man?
Hey, Will, how you doing, man? I have an answer to to what bombshell would it take to knock Trump out. I think you'd need irrefutable evidence of him flying coach. And I think if America saw that, but that's the only thing I can really imagine.
You know what's funny about you bringing that up? One of the producers in the commercial break said, what if there was like video of a hit and run? You know, like Trump hit somebody with a car and took off running. And I was like, well, I can't even picture Trump driving. Like, when's the last time he drove a car?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
And like, this isn't all that
been
new,
driven.
man. It's Ted Kennedy like got away with killing a woman, right? And that was like before I was born. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But look, this to
Go
your
ahead.
point about the voters, man. This stuff is like, I'm in Allentown. I'll probably be in PA the rest of the way, and I've been in PA all week. This weekend, I was very curious. I was back home this weekend when that whole bizarre like Trump's exhausted and senile news cycle started. And I was so curious to get back on the road and see like if anybody thinks that Donald Trump is exhausted. And of course they don't, because it's so manifestly absurd that it's one of these things when I talk to voters that they'll start laughing. That they see what's going on, and like look how fast they turned on that after the McDonald's thing, right? It was like that disappeared, and now he's back to being a tireless evil genius.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and
does that resonate? Does that resonate with people in Pennsylvania? Like I said earlier, that was Joe Biden's theme, right? That Joe Biden was running with Trump as a threat to democracy. When Kamala kicked off, she distanced herself from that theme. And if you'll notice, it was like in August and early September, you stopped hearing that phrase, threat to democracy. You really did. Like it was retired. And it was a conscious decision by the Harris campaign, because the presumption is it wasn't working. But as we enter the home stretch now, they're back to it. They're going with, that's their closing argument, threat to democracy.
There's nothing left, right? I mean, there's nothing for her to do at this point. I've the last 2 weeks in particular, I've been very curious to speak with Democrats, the ones that'll speak with me, because it gets a little hard, right? It's as I put in my column, it's like, my friends who are Mets fans who like, I couldn't shut them up 2 weeks ago. They lose to the Dodgers, and it's like, oh, you want to talk about the baseball game anymore, right? And so, I mean, it's kind of like that. And Democrats are just like, I don't really want to discuss this, But the ones who do, I mean, several of them have been very upfront about the fact that like they just don't feel like Harris offers much, right? They really are voting for the generic Democrat.
You're getting, I know you're making a joke, but I actually find some real interesting nugget there. You're getting Mets lost the series vibe in their willingness to talk to you. When you first said that it's hard to get a Democrat to talk to you, I kind of thought you were talking about because you're affiliated with Fox. But what you're telling me is a malaise like this is already lost? Is that what you're saying? Like, of course, sports fan stops talking about their team once they've lost or even in the game. If, my team is losing, I stop talking. I stop tweeting. You're getting that vibe from the Harris Democrats? Like, okay, we're losing. I'm not interested in talking about this?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally saying, I think she's losing. A month and a half ago, most of them said they expected her to win. Now, most of them do not expect them to, which isn't weird. I mean, we see this in the prediction markets. We see this sort of like in the general buzz. There was one day the other day, it was like RCP was just, it was like last week, it was like every headline was just like, should we have stuck with Biden? Or, and that's a conversation I hear from people. Is she actually doing better than Biden would have? And I don't know if we know the answer to that. But yeah, look, I've consistently found throughout this cycle that the ground is about a week ahead of the polls. And I think I know why. I think the reason is that the type of person who's going to sit down with me or Selena or somebody else for half an hour, 40 minutes and talk about politics, they're a pretty savvy political follower, right? They're probably if they don't have a Twitter account, they're someone who's paying very close attention in the same way that like back in the day, you would see stuff break on X and then like 12 hours later, it's on Facebook, right? And there was that gap. Now, there's a lot more people on Facebook, right? So you're seeing it faster on X, but it really saturates once it hits Facebook. That kind of happens with public opinion, where you start to feel it from people, and then you start seeing it in the polls. And this past week of polls, I'm not a big polls guy, man, but it's irrefutable. I mean, she's dropping 5-6 points over a month in the same poll.
So you talk to people reluctantly, their reluctance to talk to you who are Democrats. Are you finding out there many undecideds, David? And if you are, the secondary follow-up is that, does threat to democracy hit that undecided person?
No. I've definitely met Democrats who are voting against Trump, and even a few independents who are voting against Trump who have cited January 6th and threats to democracy and things like that. There's a couple buckets of undecided voters who I've met, but the overwhelmingly largest one are the people who basically liked Trump's policies, but they really don't like him. And I don't mean like he's a braggart. I mean, they really dislike him. They find him immoral and base and terrible. Those are the undecided voters, and some of them say, whatever, I'm not electing a pope, I'm electing a president, and they'll go do it. For others, it's still hard.
The question for that person, and I think you're right, there are a lot of people who like his policies but don't like him. Is that enough to vote for Kamala Harris? That's the big calculus. I want you to answer that, and then I have a follow-up. Do you think that's enough for them then to go to Kamala Harris?
No. And I think that's where, and I don't think this is something I'm really going to be able to write about until after the election, but I think one thing that got forgotten in all of this is that Joe Biden is one of the top 5 most gifted politicians of his generation. I mean, even in the current state that he's in, right? He's an incredibly gifted politician in a way that like Kamala Harris just never has been. Biden did a lot that frustrated Trump. If you think about it, the thing that Biden would do, how Biden would start saying something about Trump and then he'd go, well, I better not say what I'm thinking. You know that thing that Biden would always do?
Yeah.
That was smart, man.
Yeah,
that was like a boxer landing a jab and backing off. He would never get in tight and just throw punches with Trump because that's what Trump wants to do. Harris just isn't good at politics. She kind of got handed the district attorney's office and the AG's office and the Senate. And the American people aren't going to hand her this one. She's got to earn it.
I don't think Biden would be doing better right now. Do you think he would? If he had stayed in the race, would he be doing better than Harris? I think the senility thing had gotten too powerful, too strong, and wasn't going to go away. And I think the casual political observer started to notice you can't have a president of the United States who is losing his marbles.
Well, I mean, he's still president of the United States. Right? We still send him out there.
True.
Right? I mean, he is.
Well, you can't have another 4 years of it.
Right. But I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I think he'd be doing better in Pennsylvania. I think that there's a reason they called him Scranton Joe, where I'm going tomorrow. So I'll see if they still.
Last question for you, David. So I'm fascinated by this person that you described. Let's call them undecided, maybe swing. I don't know what we call them, independent.
Yeah.
They like Trump's policies. They hate him as a person. They're having to decide, are they going to hold their nose for Trump then, or are they going to hold their nose for Kamala? It could be argued that a big swath of those people listen to Joe Rogan. It could be argued. Now, I'm not sure it's the same person you're running into in the small towns and bars and factory workers in Pennsylvania, but they may be in the suburbs. They may be somewhere else. They held that same position. I really like his policies. I hate him as a person. Do you think that Joe Rogan appearance, which is scheduled for Friday, carries more positives or negatives potentially for Trump?
I definitely think positives. And one thing that's, I've never been a big believer in endorsements, right? I never thought like celebrity endorsements, things like that really mattered very much. But I don't know if you noticed, like the other day, Dave Ramsey, the like financial radio guy, came out and endorsed Trump. And I think Trump is in a unique case as far as endorsed. Yeah, and Trump's in a unique case because every one of these kind of like normal people who was like, you know what, I've gotten over it, I'm just going to vote for the guy, to that point that we were just talking about, kind of gives permission to people to say, all right, I don't like the salacious stuff, I don't like, his sometimes
name calling, rhetoric, whatever.
His great relationship with the truth, whatever it is. But those guys really do, I think, give a lot of cover. And so, yeah, I think for him to go on Rogan and be able to do that, I mean, look, those things are risky for both sides, right? I don't know that he'd do the full 3 hours,
Yes.
but even an hour, I mean, this close to the end, it's always going to be a risk to sit down unscripted for an hour.
No doubt. He has experience. You know, I'm not going to cite anyone in particular, but I can think of someone who kind of checks the boxes of what you just described, you know, in on a lot of his policies, totally out on him as a person. And then they watched him on Andrew Schultz or Theo Vaughn or whatever it may be, and you're like, oh, I didn't really ever see that side of his personality or who he is as a person. And that's the potential positive. The negative is the unscripted, whatever it's going to be, 90 minutes with Joe Rogan, that's going to be clipped up and used in who knows how many ways. The positive is showing the other side to the human, to a new audience that probably isn't often that exposed to it, and it's their biggest hang up about Trump.
Yeah. And the humor, I mean, the understanding to humor is so important. Understanding Trump's use of hyperbole, understanding when he's serious and when he's not serious. I mean, you know, this goes all the way back to 2016, but like I think the reason that the McDonald's thing like set everybody on the left's hair on fire, is that that's authentically him, and he's charming and funny, and that boy, the left really can't let people see that, because then when they take something out of context about dictator on day one or whatever it is, everybody goes, oh no, that's just Trump being Trump.
Right. And that's David Marcus being David Marcus. Checking in was like he always does from the road, this time Allentown, Pennsylvania. His columns, you should check them out at foxnews.com. And we appreciate him, as always, being here with us on the Will Cain Show. Thank you, David. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We had a big schedule for you, just so you know. On the week of the election, we're going to have special, longer, 2-hour shows. And on Election Day, special time from a live location. I'm going to tell you more about that. Make sure you stay tuned. We're going to have a ton of guests lined up for that week to carry us through, to hang out together, to analyze, to talk about, to understand America and the race for president. That's all coming up on The Will Cain Show. See you next time.